I think we're due to start at 9 o'clock, aren't we? Yeah? Anybody object if we start on time?
Would you like me to introduce this?
It's up to you.
Sorry, as you can see, I'm not Ben Furty. But Richard Davis asked me just to come and welcome everybody to this, the philosophy circuit, and because I'm one of the PSGB exec members. So if anyone wants any more information about PSGB, if you are new to it, then very, very welcome to ask us session. We've got a few announcements of various philosophy events as well, which we'll talk about at the end of the session too. So welcome to all of you, and I'm delighted to introduce first of all Jack. And I should just pass through to
Yeah, thanks very much. Right, so the reason it's a real pleasure to be here is that it was 40 years ago that I was at the Institute. I just finished the philosophy, the psychology academic course in philosophy. And it was exactly 40 years ago that I was teaching in East End London, and it was understanding the philosophy of education, about the nature of educational theory. And I was being taught here that it was constituted by the philosophy, psychology, sociology, and history of education. So the philosophers were actually committed to that view of educational theory. Now, I rejected that 40 years ago, but not quite understanding why I was rejecting it. And it was only in 1983, so that was 12 years later, that Paul Hurst put forward a very clear statement about, if you like, why I had rejected it. And he said that he had believed that educational theory was made up of the disciplines, and that the practical principles that I was coming from the East End with, teaching every day, were at best pragmatic maxims that had a first crude and superficial justification in practice. That would be replaced in any rationally developed theory by principles with more theoretical justification. So I was coming here where the explicit understanding of the philosophers that my practical principles were to be replaced. It was that I rejected, and I spent the last 40 years, most of it at the University of Bath, trying to understand the nature of the practical principles that I use as an educator, and also the teacher researchers use, to explain why they do what they do and the nature of their influence. And what I wanted to do today is just bring a sense of philosophy that I'm understanding as loving wisdom. And so I've had that 40 years of reflection and thought about what I do, and this sense, yes, I really do love wisdom. So what might I share with you that comes out of that 40 years in relation to the nature of practical principles that educators use to explain their practice? And in the course of just this short space of time, am I offering anything that can help to generate a new epistemology for educational knowledge? Because I think that the standards of judgment we use are absolutely crucial in terms of that nature of that epistemology. And as I said, 40 years ago, my practical principles were to be replaced. So I've spent 40 years saying, no, they shouldn't be replaced. We should actually focus on the practical principles that you and I are using as educators, educational researchers, and try to understand them. Now, can I just ask, has anybody come with any particular questions or interests? Or can I just go into this? Because I am fascinated by my audience. Some of you may know my very first one here was 1977, and I talked at my audience of one for 15 minutes on local curriculum development before he introduced himself as Lawrence Stenhouse and said, perhaps I could develop my sense of audience. So I'm just asking, have you come with anything that you're feeling, yes, I would like very much this to be addressed in terms of this session? Can I just focus in on what I can? Is that okay? Okay, it is basically one idea I just want to share with you. And it's to do with the way we express meanings. Now, when I was here, meanings were expressed in groups, small groups, tutorial groups, about 8 people. And we would consider the nature and the meaning of concepts. So we would just do it through lexical definition, the meaning of words through other words. And this was helping to constitute the philosophy of education. Now, I just want to show you something that came out of one of my own doctoral supervisions with Jacqueline DeLong, she was at the time superintendent of schools in Canada. But it's not the use of the words. I just want to focus on this supervision session. And I'll show you it in a minute and move the cursor backwards and forwards quickly. She'd had a week with me on her PhD. We were going over her abstract because on the Monday I'd had to reject the abstract. Here on the Friday I was really commended at how good I thought this abstract now was for a doctoral thesis. But she'd heard me on the phone to another doctoral student of mine and literally talking about his wisdom. Okay, so I was really, it was called Jeff Mead, and I was really enthusiastic about what I thought was the wisdom that he was showing in his doctorate. And you'll see this moment where Jackie suddenly turns to me, because I'd said, this is really good, Jackie, this next. And she suddenly turns to me and said, you're not going to use the word wisdom with me, are you? I just turned to say no, right? Now, when you see the explosion, I think you'll see the laughter and the energy. What I want to claim with you is that as I'm here with you now, I hope that I'm expressing my love for education. It hasn't diminished over those 40 years. If you'd seen me in the East End classroom 40 years ago, I think you would recognise a similar kind of energy because I really am loving what I am doing. But to actually just use words is not sufficient to communicate that energy, which I hope you can feel that I'm expressing. And what I'm saying in terms of the philosophy of education is that we should really make sure that we include expressions of embodied energy when we're trying to clarify the meanings of the practical principles we use to explain what we're doing. Are you okay with that? Because most texts omit it. Okay, so most texts on library shelves, they can't deal with because of the representation they're using, which is simply language on words on pages of text. You can't get closer to the representation of the energy that I'm now expressing with you. And it's not just the love for what I'm doing, there are other values associated with that energy. And the one value that I want to focus on is a loving, dynamic energy. Okay, so there's a sense of loving, and loving wisdom, so that as philosophers, I think we should be really making sure that we bring in what we understand that expression of loving means, and we should also demonstrate our understanding of the wisdom, and that is not the same as the knowledge that we have. So let me just focus in non-verbally, so I'm not going to have the sound. I just want you to watch at these moments where, there we are, we're just talking about it, we're going through the abstract, serious discussion. Now, it's here that Jackie DeLong suddenly says, you're not going to use the word wisdom with me, are you? Okay, so I'm looking, no, and there it is. Now, it's that which I think is unmistakable in the sense of that energy that, that I think you all recognise that at times your whole bodies literally come alive with that expression, that passion, the energy which flows from you, often through you. If we try to capture that just on pages of text, we can't get near it. But my point has been, with my own doctoral students, that we've got to include these flows of energy, often through visual data, to communicate the meanings that we are actually expressing. Now, could I just pause there, because I've got 30-odd my doctoral students. I put them all on the web over the last 15 years, so that's about 2 a year. Now, it's not a lot, but it's more than most of my colleagues at the University of Bath. Okay, so it's quite a significant archive of doctoral students. Many of them have used multimedia forms of communication. So I'm just asking, how does that point that I'm making, which is literally, when I talk about loving wisdom, it is something that has emerged after that 40-year journey from here when I came as a physical scientist. I got my science degree, joint honours in physical chemistry, and so I want controlled experimental designs. This is what I used in my master's dissertation. It then moved, in terms of my epistemology, into dialectics. I really studied for the next 10, 12 years the nature of dialectics. I put forward that as my epistemology, and that was in my doctoral thesis. And then it moved into an understanding of the inclusional nature of the relationships I'm having. And I'll show you a little clip from the Guildhall in Bath that is speeded up, which I use in terms of the visual representation, because as I'm seeing you here, I'm constrained by my binocular vision. Okay? So whilst I focus on you, you've gone. Now what the video can do is actually hold not just this, but also it gives you a sense, which I'll show you, of the 360 degrees of which I am in, and it also helps you then to bring in the environmental and the ecological in the sense that I am part of this, and this is part of me. And that relational dynamic is something as well that I think, as philosophers, we should not ignore. But can I just pause there? Because I'm claiming that this kind of reflection, which is different to the one that I used to do as a philosopher when I was doing British analytic philosophy, is sitting in terms of words, to the point where I would like to come and say, look, I want you to see, I want to show you my practice, and I want to communicate meanings that are being expressed through the embodied expression that I'm doing in the here and now, but are then included in my explanations of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So can I just pause there? So how does that sound to you? Because it really does question, certainly, how I was initiated into the philosophy of education. It's also, with those 30 doctrines, there's a lot of external examiners now that have actually legitimated those doctrines. But they've all found it some difficulty in getting on the inside of the visual data that is being analysed to get at these qualities. One was passion for compassion. I've got this on the website as well, in the context of Alzheimer's patients and their carers. And it's a very different flow of energy and care that comes from the body and the relationship than just the words. So I suppose I'll ask how that sounds, because, as I say, in terms of developing epistemology, literally for educational knowledge, it's these relational qualities with the meanings that are coming from embodied expression of value plus energy. This is vital. It really is literally vital, but we don't get the energy from the practical principles. So can I just ask, how does that sound? Does it sound? Any responses or not? Does it make good sense to you?
So can you shift the energy in when you are self-conscious of being filmed, or are you then able to manipulate that the way that you embody knowledge because you are conscious of that you are being observed?
Yeah, this is the very first thing that people say about the video. Now I have video on myself a lot. Even now, I wasn't even conscious then. That camera, which is just on me, is actually on. Until you mentioned it, I wasn't even conscious.
Sorry.
No. I'm not conscious. Whatever it tells me that does this work is the very first time you use it, you're actually self-conscious, you're conscious of the camera. Very, very quickly, you lose that awareness. And so, even with children, where the ethical approvals have all been given with parents and children, you see that there's an initial, but it only lasts minutes. And then you'll find, as I said, you try it on yourselves, that you can see that you're actually acting naturally. You know, the camera isn't actually influencing how you are behaving. And you can check this yourselves, you know, because, as I said, I've been involved in a lot of this. And this it's a really good question, because a lot of people are worried. And also, people are quite anxious the very first time they do this. You know, when you think, I first of all came across this in 1972, the inspectorate in London gave me one of 3 cameras that was in the Barking area to experiment in my science department. So I've been doing it, you know, since then, and also with my doctoral and master's students. But it's a really good question about does it influence you?
Just building on it, because I think the other part of your question was, can you, once you become aware of how, like, you're looking at this being used spontaneously in a way, you're trying to capture it spontaneously, but can it be used in a way adding value to the wisdom?
Yeah. Now, what I've done, I have a webpage, it's called actionresearch.net. Just remember that, actionresearch.net, all one word, actionresearch.net. I put all the notes that I did for today will be on my website by next Wednesday. And you'll see that I show this process of what we call empathetic resonance. Okay, that idea that, as I did this with Jackie DeLong, we could both relive that moment with that explosion. Yeah, so the energy was unmistakable, I think. You can just see it. But then, if you think about this idea of, think of a loving dynamic energy. So you're actually not just saying it's energy, you're putting the values in. And one of the key things that I learned in linguistic philosophy, which I really enjoyed, was that how desirable it is that we can share meanings. Well, those came from lexical definitions. With this, I've done this time and time again now with this notion of empathetic resonance. That by moving that clip, and as I say, these are all on the presentation on the web, by moving this like this, you can stop it at that moment. And there, the visceral response that you can link in with empathetic resonance, you can check with each other. Are we communicating meaning? But it's actually coming literally through the embodied expressions in the relationship, in time, and then it's gone. So you can use that notion with a cursor, you just move backwards and forwards, and I believe that everybody here will start to feel that empathetic resonance, especially if you, our colleague or student, are actually being shown to each other, so you can develop a shared understanding of the meaning. But that's a really vital question. That's the most significant one for me. Can we actually share these meanings? The examiners with the PhD at on the web, Passion for Compassion, they were convinced because they were shown videos of the Alzheimer's pages of their parents. It has to know why I'm thinking this. There's a particular moment where we take the cursor backwards and forwards, where the Alzheimer's patient that you think is just comatose on a settee. The husband is in front of her so he can't see her. He's telling about all the things he does as a carer. Suddenly, she's called Marion, comes and she starts to kind of like listen. And she just does this with a beam on her face to the researcher she knows well. Yeah? And it was that moment that got the passion for compassion that the examiners understood this was an embodied expression. It wasn't just in the words we use, it was coming out of the body.
I'm from a physical science background, so the use of the term kind of energy and resonance is, to me, and this is my deficiency, a slightly woollier term than perhaps dealing with human biological responses, dealing with social constructs. So, and you're from a physical science background,
I am.
So I wonder why you've gone down the road of those slightly woollier terms.
Now, for me, in education, they're not woolly because, first of all, when I used my science background to generate the controlled experimental design with statistical analysis of covariance with a treatment group, to work out the dependent and independent variance. But now, what I discovered for myself was that that was an inappropriate way of getting to an explanation of how I could improve my practice, because everything to do with my values and energy were eliminated by the very methods I was using. So I then had to, and it was quite painful, it lasted 3 months, this transition, using Michael Polanyi's personal knowledge. Now, that's where I started, where he says, look, take a decision to understand the world from your point of view, as a person claiming originality and exercising judgment with universal intent. Now that was a big move for me, because as a scientist, I come with that objectivity, remove the I, you've got to get rid of values, you've got to create a controlled experimental design. Yet when I was with my kids in the East End, asking how do I improve what I'm doing with you, it was more based on this kind of the connectivity, the relational dynamic, the valuing of the other. And I think I found a way now of getting closer to it than I managed when I was just writing text for reference journals. Okay. Am I okay for time? What time do you?
Do you want to continue in this discuss, Freya, or would you rather stop at 20 past and then open the floor to questions? It's up to you, Andy.
Well, I mean, okay, I'll just mention one other thing about this, because the thing that you people can just laugh at, but what I'd just like you to just look at this, a speeded up video, right? Now, that's me at a workshop in the Guildhall, Bath. I mean, it's got real memories for me, because at a spot here, I was kicked out of as a Labour councillor, in 1982, in this hall, when, there's divisions in the Labour Party. So it's got real memories for me. But what it does for me is, it brings home to me where my binocular vision can't communicate, that this ecology, this environmental, the influences, that I am in there, I'm part of it. And there's a relational dynamic at work, which is rather like allowing in both the energy, but also the relational qualities that, for example, I know that I'm involved in South Africa in a research project on transformative educational studies. Okay, so I can bring that in. The Pestalozzi program in Europe, I don't know if you know this, 47 member states, they've actually started to take action research and to use that. The American Education Research Association this next year, they've actually said, look, our mission, we've done well with advancing knowledge and promoting scholarly inquiry, but we haven't done well on actually using research to improve practice and serve the public good. So they're focusing on that second half of the mission. Now, this allows me to see myself in those relations. So not just to get the binocular vision, but being very aware that these are influential. And that, the video, if you see yourselves and you can speed it up in those kind of contexts, it does change your perception. I'll guarantee that. You know, you want to try and test the validity of what I'm saying. But that's what I just wanted to share with you. If you like, it was a 40-year journey, and I just wanted to pick out, and you'll see all this, it's on the actionresearch.net. Next Wednesday, all my notes for this presentation are there. But I do hope you can just reflect on that one point about the influence on the philosophy of education, especially in terms of those practical principles that you and I use to explain what we're doing. And I think it's got enormous significance for the epistemology of educational knowledge. But as I said, because all our academic life, and that I did for years, conformed to the research assessment exercise. So at Bath, we got 5 gradings, in the last 3 exercises, yeah? So I conformed in that I'd produce in the referee journals, knowing that I was denied some of my fundamental values. So I published elsewhere with multimedia. Yes.
Do you think also that this has the potential to be used as another surveillance tool?
No, it undoubtedly does. Okay?
Yeah.
So it has the potential to be used like that, just as the action research cycle can be used literally for evil ends.
Yes, because if you follow the trajectory of teacher surveillance, and now, imagine putting a camera in every classroom and being observed from every angle and how much time and motion studies,
So
I go down that path and it starts to get a bit.
Oh no, absolutely. All of these things that I've been working on can be used for literally evil ends, evil purposes. I think the way you can protect yourself against this is to protect democratic evaluation. That's one of the ways in which, for example, coming here, it allows me to make public my beliefs that you can then respond to. There's an e-form I've been running for 8 years. You can link in with actionresearch.net to make a response, if you would, to what I've been saying today, which I find most helpful. But absolutely, this is why our values and holding them up to each other, this critical discourse is vital to protect us, ourselves and others from that. Yeah. Yes?
I find this particularly interesting because I'm interested in the absence of tolerance in mathematics education.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that in the traditional maths classroom, it's almost like the body is anaesthetised. That people sit silently, they are competitive, it's hierarchical, the discourse is around obedience and commands. And it seems, if you look at a lot of traditional maths classrooms, and it's a reason a lot of people leave mathematics, I think, is because of that discourse where the body is very strictly controlled. And there doesn't seem to me to be very much empathetic resonance at all in traditional maths classrooms. So I'm picking up on the sort of practices that maths teachers engage in.
And also, to a certain extent, with science teachers. But I was supposed to be chairing the symposium I'd actually organised downstairs, and it's a clash, okay, with this. So I've come here. And there are a couple downstairs presenting, and one of them is showing mathematics with this process. So it might be nice if I took your email and then put you in touch with the maths person who's using this
approach.
That'd
be very interesting.
To actually bring the body fully into the mathematics education. Yes, that'd be great. So I'll get your email.
Okay, thank you.
Are you okay? Well, many thanks. I have to say it's a real pleasure because of that 40 years since I was here. Thank you.